Thank you very much and good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here with President Macron, a firm friend to me personally and a firm ally to the United Kingdom. We first met in the Elysee, I think about 2 years ago, before I came into office when I was leader of the opposition. And it was clear to me then that we had a shared sense of the dangerous times that we're living through and of our responsibility to step up and to lead. We also share the fundamental belief that we serve our people better, create better jobs and opportunities, make our nation stronger, fairer and more secure if we work together. And the state visit has been a celebration of this relationship, our unique bonds of history and of culture. And today, our task is to look forward, to deliver a step change in this partnership, to meet the challenges of this moment and get the results that people want to see. Starting first with tackling illegal migration. Now, this is a global crisis, and it's a European crisis, but it is also very acutely a crisis for our two nations. A crisis of law, security, humanity and fairness. We face a sprawling, multi-billion-pound enterprise run by organised criminal gangs, leading hundreds of people to their death in the Channel. So we're determined, together, to end this vile trade. There is no silver bullet here, but with a united effort, new tactics and a new level of intent, we can finally turn the tables. So I'm pleased to announce our agreement today on a groundbreaking returns pilot. For the very first time, migrants arriving via small boat will be detained and returned to France in short order. In exchange for every return, a different individual will be allowed to come here via a safe route, controlled and legal, subject to strict security checks and only open to those who have not tried to enter the UK illegally. This will show others trying to make the same journey that it will be in vain and the jobs they've been promised in the UK will no longer exist because of the nationwide crackdown we're delivering on illegal working, which is on a completely unprecedented scale. The President and I have agreed that this pilot will be implemented in coming weeks. Now, I know some people will still ask, why should we take anyone in? So let me address that directly. We accept genuine asylum seekers because it is right that we offer a haven to those in most dire need. But there's also something else here. Something more practical, which is that we simply cannot solve a challenge like stopping the boats by acting alone and telling our allies that we won't play ball. That is why today's agreement is so important, because we will solve this, like so many of our problems, by working together. Just look at the steps the French government is planning, subject to their ongoing maritime review, to allow their officers to intervene in shallow waters and prevent more boats from launching. That is a big step, and I want to thank the President for driving it through. So this is our plan together, hard-headed, aggressive action on all fronts to break the gang's business model, secure our borders, and show that by attempting to reach the UK by small boat will only end in failure, detention, and return. Second, we've also made real progress today on boosting jobs and growth, building on our new agreement with the EU. We're ambitious for what we can do together as G7 economies, close trading partners, and leaders in areas that will dominate in years to come. Together, our countries account for over half of European spending on research and technology. So we've gone further today, collaborating on satellite connectivity, bringing together our leading supercomputers to seize the opportunities created by AI and bringing down barriers to trade and investment in strategic sectors. Just this week, we've welcomed EDF's major investment in Sizewell C, which will create thousands of jobs, boost our energy security, and protect bill payers for years to come. Third, we've strengthened our work to stand together for European security and in support of Ukraine. Because I'm clear, the security of the British people starts in Ukraine. We have just co-chaired a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, including representatives from the United States for the first time. We announced plans for a new multinational force, Ukraine, headquartered in Paris, so that we're ready to support a peace deal when it comes. But while Putin turns his back on peace, we are rallying more support for Ukraine right now to defend their people and force Putin to the table. Now, as Europe's only nuclear powers and as leaders in NATO, we play a vital role in preserving the peace and security on this continent. So today we've updated the historic Lancaster House Treaty to protect our people and our way of work. This is a major modernisation. We are overhauling the combined Joint Expeditionary Force to make it 5 times larger, 50,000 troops strong, able to act across every domain. But we're going further. This morning, we signed the Northwood Declaration, confirming for the first time that we are coordinating our independent nuclear deterrence. From today, our adversaries will know that any extreme threat to this continent would prompt a response from our 2 nations. There is no greater demonstration of the importance of this relationship. And while we stand together for our collective defence, we must also deliver a defence dividend for working people. So we've agreed a deeper industrial partnership today to bring our defence industries closer than ever before. We're not just talking about stepping up. On defence, jobs and growth, we're delivering it. Previous governments tried and failed to secure results like this. We can achieve them now because we've taken the time and the care to do the real work, the quiet, serious diplomacy, to build proper relationships which multiply our strength and the opportunities that we enjoy. So, Emmanuel, thank you so much for being here. We represent 2 fiercely proud and independent nations, but by working together, we are delivering for our people, and we're a force for good in a dangerous world. Thank you, Emmanuel, and over to you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre, cher Keir. Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, généraux, amiral, Mesdames les ambassadrices, Mesdames et Messieurs, je veux d'abord ici remercier Sa Majesté le Roi Charles III pour son invitation à effectuer cette visite d'État, la première d'un président français depuis 17 ans, et pour l'accueil exceptionnel que nous avons reçu avec mon épouse et ma délégation.
And also, I would like to also thank the Prime Minister Keir Starmer for the quality of our discussions during the 37th Summit in Downing Street today and also in Northwood today.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, cher Keir, vous venez de rappeler
Dear Keir, Prime Minister, you have just talked to us about the progress that we have made today, the agreements that we have achieved. And I think that these agreements will be marking for several decades ago. On Tuesday, when we were in Westminster, I said that this state visit once again highlighted the strength of our agreements and of our alliance, and the fact that we had a great deal in common for the future. First of all, defense and security. The UK and France have been working closely for many years. We are the two nuclear powers. We are the two permanent members of the Security Council. Our armies have the greatest experience combat, and also we are truly at the top of the spectrum concerning the hunting of enemy submarines and also fighting terrorism. And we talked about this just recently with NATO. Since the 2010 Lancaster House Treaty, we have been working not only to cooperate in the area of our armies, but also nuclear areas. However, our partnership has changed, and today we're not only talking about going on expeditions in areas where there are failed states to fight terrorists, but we have to also face threats on our continent, in Europe, in the years ahead. And therefore, Europe must realize that it can actually depend on our duo, that is Great Britain and France. And this is why we have taken the steps that we have in the Northwood Declaration. First of all, we've taken 3 important decisions in the area of nuclear energy. First of all, our doctrines. In 1995 at Chequers, we had stated quite clearly that we did not and could not imagine a situation where the vital interests of one had be affected without the other stepping in. And today, in this radically new world, and given that we have a European way of thinking and spirit, we must state again that we cannot imagine an extreme threat to Europe without there being a swift response from us, whatever that sort of response may be. The second decision we took is that we do not exclude coordinating our deterrence. This is a clear message that our partners must hear, and also our adversaries should heed. The third message is the choice to strengthen our cooperation in the area of deterrence. This could be for political reasons, capacities, and operations. For this, we have decided to set up a group, which is a supervisory group on nuclear affairs, and these are very important fundamental issues that we have decided on today. Our 2 countries will remain independent, sovereign, but we are giving ourselves the means, when required, to work together so that we can stand up to this more threatening environment that we are living in. From an operational point of view, we have decided to completely change the combined joint expeditionary force, which is really at the base of our relationship. It is moving from a brigade to being an armed force. It can be used in a major intervention. This means that we will be multiplying by 5 the hardcore that will be able to actually made available to the alliance, and this will be made up of French and British forces. This partnership gives real coherence and credibility to the NATO pillar that this represents, and also to our policy. From a capacity point of view, we've also decided to step up and work on future cruise missiles and anti-naval missiles, but also work on the future generation air missiles. These will be new surface air missiles as well, and also working with Germany, we will be working on long-range missiles as well. And we have also decided to have additional cooperation in the areas of artificial intelligence, space, cyber issues, but also information manipulation, particularly at a time when we are regularly attacked on these different fronts. So you can see here that we have actually taken steps to stand up against these threats. The UK, of course, has its own singular position, but we can say that the threats have no borders and our solidarity has no borders. We are working closely with the UK, with the European Intervention Initiative. But also what is getting us closer today is once again the decision to stand up for Ukraine. The coalition of the willing is there. President Ukraine is in Rome today and has made a statement in which we should all heed as well. Here, once again, in February, when we held the first meeting in Paris, just a few weeks after meeting in your country, we were concerned that if we had any sort of divergence with our colleagues across the Atlantic, we should send the right sort of message to our Ukrainian friends. And today there are US senators that are ready to strengthen the sanctions, and also the US Special Envoy Keir will be taking steps along these lines. But also we must continue helping her and supporting Ukraine in the short term with drones, additional capacities, funding, etc., so that we can achieve a ceasefire. This, I think, is what the 18th package of sanctions from the EU is all about, and also the US package of sanctions has the same aim, that is to be a deterrent to the aggression of Russia. And we've also stated that the military planning that we had set up a few weeks ago is now being completed. I'd like to thank General Burke and his colleague for the great work that has been carried out. 30 countries have been mobilized, and around this, with this partnership and this Franco-British relationship, planning allows us, when a ceasefire is signed, to make sure that it can be lasting and credible. And this will be in the air, on land, on sea, with Ukrainian forces, and also with backup forces that we have planned on. We've also planned to have a special forces group in Paris, and there are several planners that are getting ready for this particular plan. So we were asked a few weeks ago whether the coalition of the willing was something that was concrete. So I just wish to say it's not merely concrete, it goes much further. There are hundreds of thousands of armed military forces who are already engaged, and we are also fighting against the Russian Phantom forces, and also the steps that have been taken to maintain sanctions on Russia's oil production and resources. We have to make sure that we can actually also work in other areas, and that is, for example, in the Middle East. We have also asked for a ceasefire in Gaza and a liberation of all the hostages following the 7th of October. This is absolutely indispensable so that the ghastly situation that is now prevailing in Gaza should be ended. And of course, all of this leads to threats, not only for the region, but also for the world. There is a sense of things being truly getting out of hand, and we have to propose a political solution. And the two-state solution would be the base, which would allow Israel to live in peace and security with its neighbors. I think it's also important to speak in unison in Paris, in London, and elsewhere to recognize the state of Palestine and recognize that this is the only way in which we can have lasting peace. During our summit, we've also found 9 years after Brexit true cohesion between us, and I would like to thank Prime Minister Keir Starmer for having recreated a sense of trust, re-established connections with the EU, and had targeted actions which correspond to our joint interests. And on the 29th of May, we signed a declaration between our countries concerning many different areas where there is convergence. It is a reset, and now this reset, which on the 29th of May considered the EU, will be a bilateral one. And here we are going well beyond what Brexit led to. In fact, we are the third investor in the UK. There are many hundred companies, French companies in the UK who employ many local people. We have signed many agreements between our universities, between our companies, and today we are also working in two areas, civil nuclear nuclear areas. EDF will be investing in Sizewell C and will be investing 12.5%. This is extremely good for reaching zero-carbon economies in the UK and also making savings. And it's also very good for EDF, which will be developing EPR technology in Sizewell, where there will be true scale economies because of the steps already taken in Ingle Point. The second area where we will be working closely together as the space sector. The UK will be contributing to Eutelsat's capital and will add to the increase that was organized and set up on the 19th of June. This means that the total will go up to 1.5 billion, and it will make it possible for our UK partners to keep their share in the investment capital of Eutelsat. We believe in Eutelsat's increase and its LEO constellation, and we are reinforcing our European cooperation in space connectivity. So in these two areas, in space and civil nuclear sectors, which are future sectors and very important for our futures, we will continue to work closely together. There are more than 300,000 French people living in the UK and close to 200,000. And therefore, we were happy also to announce yesterday that to the British Museum from September 26 to 2027, June or July, we will be loaning the Bayer tapestry, and we will be getting the Sutton Hoo treasure and many other treasures that will be exhibited in Caen and Rouen. Obviously, we will do everything necessary to protect these works on both sides of the channel and make sure that even if we will have experts to make sure that the works are kept safely, even if this might disrupt somewhat Larry the cat. Anyway, we will also continue to work closely together to fight the trafficking of migrants and to fight against illegal immigration. You've mentioned this, Mr. Prime Minister. This is indispensable for our two countries. In the Sanders Agreement, we had taken extremely important decisions, particularly putting an end to all the attempts made to use rail or road transport to move migrants abroad. And this was actually commonplace some years ago. So we've managed to put a halt to that completely. And we've also been able to control the small boats' departures from our shores. However, there have been a step up. And since January, there has been an increase in illegal crossings with new methods using taxi boats. And the traffickers are taking increasing risks for the crossings. And they are also making the migrants who are escaping hardship in their countries to face even greater risks. And this is why we have more than 1,500 security and intervention forces, because this is a problem on both sides of the channel. And it is causing in our areas in the north of France, as on your southern coasts, great hardship and difficulties. Since Brexit, and I'm saying this openly and frankly, it's not your case, Prime Minister, but many in your country thought that with Brexit it would be easier to fight illegal immigration much better. However, since then, there is no migratory agreement with the EU. There is no legal base. There is no alternative access to actually be able to land in the UK or to be able to cross. So in fact, it's exactly the opposite of what Brexiters thought was going to happen. We also thought today, thanks to the work that's been carried out by our home ministers, that a political principle, agreement in principle should be set up. And this would be very dissuasive. It would be to open legal access to those who have connections with the UK and also make it possible for those who are actually in the small boats crossing to be returned. So this is a one-in, one-out migration deal. And the steps, therefore, that are being taken would be also in keeping with the EU decision to always apply the external border to the EU as the entry point where the actual rules will agree. This will also allow us to fight the trafficking and also to use our means to fight illegal immigration and saving lives on the high seas. We also want to take steps concerning the routes or the transit areas, and we should also work on convincing those all along the transit countries and from the countries of origin. And we have been working on this already with Iraq, and we will be working with other countries to prevent the departure. And also, I would like to thank the Prime Minister for taking steps to fight against the shadow economy, illegal work in the UK, which is an attractive force. And I think this is something that we've also talked about today. So I think you've all understood what I'm trying to say. These are strong new decisions that we have taken to fight against the networks and illegal immigration. And this will allow us to guarantee safety in our both countries. Ladies and gentlemen, this was some additional information that I wanted to share with you. But allow me to conclude by once again expressing my full thanks to you, Prime Minister. I think you have said this quite clearly. This shows that we have rebuilt trust several years after Brexit. It is a trust that exists between our governments, our nations, and between our peoples. And I really think that the steps that we have been taking in the past few months, again, in the Coalition of the Willing and elsewhere, I think that on all the subjects that I have raised, we will show that we have true commitments to work together. And I think this summit has given a fillip to what His Majesty King Charles talked about a few days ago, and that is the friendly alliance. And we are giving it some content, some flesh and bone, and we think that this is the right way to go ahead. This is why we have decided to adopt it and work together to move ahead, hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. We've now got a number of questions from both the French media and the British media. I'm going to start with Robert Peston, ITV. Robert.
Hello, it's Robert Peston, ITV, as you said, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, can a pilot that will see relatively few expulsions each week really have any serious deterrent effect when there are about 800 a week on average currently crossing the Channel? Monsieur le Président, pourquoi est-ce que votre police ne fait pas plus pour
why is your police not doing more to actually prevent those who are asylum seekers from crossing the Channel? There are approximately 700 every week.
Is a lighter note or not?
Especially one question. We're on
well,
the third one, Robert.
Be very brief.
It's become a tradition.
I think it's not completely unfair to say that you are sort of members of the slightly beleaguered class of centrist leaders, and I wondered if you'd shared any survival tips with each other.
Robert, thank you very much for your question. Firstly, on the returns pilot, the first thing to appreciate is this is groundbreaking because this is a scheme intended to break the model and to make it clear that if you cross in a small boat, then you'll end up where you started. And the purpose of that is a pilot to break the model, and therefore, obviously, the numbers, if successful, will ramp up, but it's a pilot to break the model. That is the whole point of it. It is groundbreaking, and it's no wonder that for years, British governments, previous governments, have been trying to secure a deal like this, a returns agreement like this, because all governments have realised just how important it is. And we've now been able to agree it, and we've agreed it because we have collaborated through serious diplomacy to get an outcome which is best for both of our countries. And so I'm very pleased that we've been able to agree this here today. Emmanuel.
Merci beaucoup pour votre question.
Thank you for your question.
La première chose,
well, the first thing,
nous travaillons efficacement et
as
nous
I
avons
said,
des accords
we are
déjà
working
solides.
in a very efficient manner, and we have good agreements between us. I'm not trying to say that we're wasting British money or that we're not doing our job, because when you put a pound in this deal, we put €3 in the deal. So we too are investing a lot to defend the border, which is a border, which is an external border. We've also closed many of the routes, the road and rail crossings, and we've reduced the number of small boats. However, there are traffickers who actually adapt to this and step up. And what we also have to do is step up our response to the Brexit. What was sold to the British people was a lie, that the problem was Europe. But if you have a legal void, obviously you have a problem. And for the first time in 9 years, we've got a real response from your government, which is a pragmatic government who has taken steps with this pilot to help, therefore, those who have legitimate requirements or rights to move to the UK to be able to, and also to bring them some back who have used the illegal route. But it is extremely difficult because obviously we've got to get the Dublin agreements to work. France cannot actually take in people that you don't want. We've got to make sure that this works with also the countries of first entry. And so you can understand that we also have to get the Dublin agreements to work. This is why we have agreements with the Spanish, with the Italians, with the Greeks, etc., which you will help us to obtain. So I think it's a good agreement. We are working, we are getting good results, we are adapting. But I would also like to say that what we have achieved with Iraq in the last few months jointly with our joint task force is very important, because in the end, one-third of the clandestine, the illegal migrants who are in Europe, in Schengen, want to get to the UK. So obviously they are grouping at our joint borders, but it is important to have preventive action with the transit and departure countries, that we can actually try to put an end to the reasons for which they wish to cross. So this is what your government is doing also, for example, fighting illegal jobs and working on identity cards and so on and so forth, to be able to prevent them to find it too easy to settle in the UK. And also, we also believe that our responsibility right now is always to come back to the facts, to science, to data, to the complexity of our world, and to explain exactly what we're doing, and also say that there may be political disagreements between us, but we should never allow ourselves to give in to what populists are trying, where they are always trying to transfigure, change facts and deny science. And I think that that is really something that we have to hold strong to. And then I also believe that these problems that are more and more complex can only be solved jointly. And I think we've got to have cooperation, European cooperation and others. Populists frequently think that they've got to go look inwards and just close off to other people. And do you think that illegal immigration, financial issues, or growth was solved 9 years ago thanks to Brexit? Not at all. They are being solved by a government that wants to reach out to its partners, its reliable partners, and to Europe. And that is the point of this sort of cooperation. And also, I've never felt isolated, to answer your question. When I was elected, I realized a few months after Brexit, a few months after Mr. President Trump's first mandate, we felt that this was the end of progressists, this was the end of that sort of vision. But in 2017, we had proof of the opposite. And I hope that many European leaders will continue to govern by explaining to their populations and citizens how complex issues are, and also how important hope is in a society. Because if you don't have that hope, you will just look inwards, which is not a solution to the problems and does not allow our youth to have a future. So we have a very optimistic view of the future.
Robert, just on the third bit of your question, it is the mission of this government and my mission to re-engage and to re-establish our place on the global stage through cooperation, serious, a quiet diplomacy, to get results for the British public. And that's the way we've gone about our business, and that is exactly how we've come to the agreement we have today on the returns agreement. But can I just add to something Emmanuel said, because I think this is really important, because irregular migration is a serious problem across the world, across Europe. It is a common problem for all European countries. It is now on the agenda of practically all European meetings in a way it simply wouldn't have been years ago, but it requires a serious, pragmatic response, not the politics, the performative politics of the easy answers. And it is very important that we are able to show collectively, the two of us as leaders of two great nations confronting this threat, that social democracy can prevail and provide the answers to these serious problems, because otherwise the easy answers get an airing. And it is of some significance, I think, that whilst we have been working hard to get the returns agreement, others have been simply taking pictures of the problem. And that is where the politics is. It's this, we have to show that pragmatic politics is the way to deliver the results which matter for both of our peoples. It is important to the UK and to France, but it is really important in this age that we show that social democracy has the answers to the threats that we face across Europe and across the world. Thank you, Robert. I'll go to Stefan, please, from The Times.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Stefan Boscher from The Times. Firstly, are you able to give a guarantee that this deal will not be caught up in the courts and will not become another Rwanda that never happens? And secondly, how will the 50 or the roughly 50 people a week who are sent back, how will they actually be chosen from the UK? I mean, there's 800. How are you going to choose just the 50? And Mr. President, how committed are you to making sure that this pilot scheme actually becomes a full-blown scheme and that the numbers dramatically increase? And just lastly, if I may, you said during your opening address that since January the numbers have dramatically risen, and they have. Whose fault is that, yours or the man standing next to you?
Stefan, firstly, in response to just the last bit of your question, we both have a responsibility together to solve this. And one of the problems, to my mind, in the past has been the finger-pointing, the blame game, the megaphone politics, which has achieved precisely nothing on this and many other issues, which is why we've never engaged in it. It is why the EU-UK reset was a success, because I said at the outset we're not going to engage in the politics of finger-pointing, blaming, and going to the nearest microphone to disparage our partners. And it's exactly the same approach that I take with Emmanuel on this issue. It is both of our responsibilities. And I'm not going to descend into this issue of the politics of the past, which really didn't work and didn't deliver for the United Kingdom and didn't deliver for France or the EU. On the question of the pilot itself, it will be operationalised in coming weeks, so that is a good thing. It is, of course, a pilot. It is there to prove the concept that if you come over by small boats, then you will be returned to France. Of course, being a pilot, it is very important that it works, and we need to make sure that it does work. And if it works, what it does is break the model, and that's the only way in the end to stop this vile trade. And so that's why this is a real breakthrough moment today. As I say, many governments have tried to get this far and have failed to do so. In terms of those that will be returned, I'm not going to go into the details of that, because that has the potential to undermine how this will operate. But it is important that we see this for what it is, which is a real breakthrough in the way that we tackle the vile trade of people smuggling. Emmanuel.
No, I totally agree. No finger pointing, and we work closely together. And the only way to be efficient is to work together, because you should not underestimate the impact this situation has on the northern part of France. And I think it's very often underestimated in your domestic debates. But it's not a gift for Calais, Dunkirk, and a lot of cities in France to have all these illegal migrants. And even when you go to these migrants and offer them asylum in France and some solutions, they just refuse. They want to cross the channel. So we have no other options than working closely together. And this is not an easy situation for French people and all these cities. And I want to thank all the mayors and population of north of France for their contribution to this common work. Second, what is very important to understand is this is a collaborative, cooperative, and comprehensive plan, working from the origin country, the increasing and the adaptation of our bilateral action, and the fight against precisely this illegal situation on your soil. And this is the efficiency on this new plan, and I'm totally committed to make it work, because this is clearly our willingness and our common interests. And this pilot project, I wanted to insist on one point. This is a deterrence effect. And beyond the figures you mentioned, the point and what we want to do is precisely to have this deterrence effect vis-à-vis all these smugglers and all the traffickers, in order to send a message that we are efficient and they have no more interest to try to play with the rules.
Thank you so much. I'll go now to Christelle, if I may, from France Television.
My first question is to you, Mr. President. You are planning to have a rapid response from both countries if there were to be any extreme threat in Europe. What do you mean by extreme threat? And do you think Ukraine would be part of the perimeter of intervention if there was to be a joint force? And now to the Prime Minister, what shape will the coordination between the two countries take? What sort of operations, and how will you be able to balance your relations with the United States and these relations with France? First of all, when we talk about reassuring or strengthening our relations and our commitment to the Ukraine, this has got nothing to do with what I talked about earlier on. We have a short-term training and support system for Ukraine. When the ceasefire is signed, then our two militaries will have to guarantee to make sure that the ceasefire can be maintained in the air, on land and in sea. And that is the sort of signal that we will be sending out. Now, in parallel, completely separately, we've decided to coordinate our nuclear policies and deterrence. I don't think no other countries have that sort of close position concerning nuclear deterrence. But this, in fact, goes with the security ambiguity that exists. And I will never answer your question in the same way, because I think what is going along with this deterrence is maintaining our credibility. And also, we have said that we would have strategic exchanges, operational and capacity partnerships. But once again, we remain sovereign and independent in the starting up and the managing of our nuclear capacities. I really think these two issues are totally separate and have to be kept as such. Otherwise, this might cause confusion. So we do have doctrines. French doctrine is well known, and I reconfirmed it 3 years ago. But we also have this coordination, which doesn't remove any of our autonomy and independence, and is quite different from what we are doing for Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Just on the nuclear agreement that we've reached today, it is truly historic. Now, I understand why there's a lot of focus and attention on the irregular migration agreement that we've reached today. That is in itself extremely important. But I would say the nuclear agreement that we've reached is equally important and significant and historic, because we are the two nuclear nations in Europe, and we've agreed to take an incredible step forward this morning in relation to how we coordinate our capabilities in support of Europe and in support of NATO. And that is a historic moment for both of our countries, a historic moment for Europe and for the world. And you ask about the US and Europe. I have no doubt in my mind that NATO has been the single most effective military alliance ever, and for decades has allowed us to live in peace. And it is our responsibility not just to look back and celebrate that fact, but to ensure as joint leaders that we take forward and make sure that that is there for many, many years to come. The way to do that as I've argued many times now, is for Europe to step up and do more, for Europe to do more in its own collective defence. Partly that's to do with financing, of course, and we had the agreement at NATO just 2.5 weeks ago, but it's more than that. It's about coordinating and cooperating. And Emmanuel and I have been talking deeply about this for some time now. How do our two countries show the leadership that is required? That is why we took the step we did with the coalition of the willing, to ensure that Europe could see that there were two countries prepared to step forward on this. We do the same in relation to nuclear, in support of that wider argument on defence across Europe. So, as I say, I absolutely understand, because it's such a huge challenge, why irregular migration is the focus very much of the outcome of this summit. But don't underestimate just how important the nuclear coordination and cooperation is as well, in terms of the history of the defence of Europe. Thank you. And I've got Thomas from RTL.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. Il y a quelques semaines, vous avez dit aux Français que face à cette nouvelle menace, cette nouvelle donne, il fallait faire des efforts. Tomorrow, the
Chief of Staff will be presenting the level of threats. So what sort of threat are we facing? What sort of steps do the French and the Europeans have to take? Would some have to be mobilized into a sort of reserve force? And Mr. Prime Minister, the President talked about a recognition of Palestine. Where are you on this particular point? And when will you take a decision on a joint position on this? Thank you. Thank you. You're right to say that given the situation a few months ago, I asked all the French to be aware of the level of risk. And that has not changed. This is because we've got to continue helping Ukraine as much as possible. The Russian threat is there. And also because Russia is still as determined as ever. And on European lands, therefore, at least geographically speaking, in Europe, just a few thousand kilometers away from Paris, you have a power which is a nuclear power and which is spending 40% of its budget on weapons and arms, military affairs, and is therefore ready to use them. And there's no reason to think that they're going to stop what they have started, which was at the moment when the war started. Russia has never, from the very outset, respected any of its commitments, and therefore we have to stand up to that. But there are other threats as well, terrorism, and also other issues that exist. The cyber, maritime threats exist as well, and therefore the Chiefs of Staff tomorrow will be describing these threats. We'll talk about the different steps that have been taken for the two military bills that were passed, which are really unknown in France. We have not waited, but as of 2017, we started a strategic review, and we also took steps, and we also started a military program that is actually much wide-reaching. But we've got to change our strategy, and this is because of the nature of the risk which has changed. And this is why General Burka will give further explanations tomorrow, and I will also explain on Sunday evening, just before the 14th of July, Bastille Day. I will talk about some strategic decisions that are going to be taken concerning investments for the future. Now, concerning mobilizing our populations, we have decided, and this is for now 30 years, to put an end to compulsory conscription. And we have a reserve force, and this reserve force is important, and the General will talk about this tomorrow. This is what will support our forces and will give whatever additional support is needed in our attempts to thwart thwart these threats. And then there's the issue concerning national service. At the beginning of the year, I've asked for our minister to look into this, to study this issue. It is being prepared. There will be a conditional study that will be carried out in the summer. And at the end of the summer, early autumn, I will come back to all of you and explain what sort of decisions we've taken and which will be part of the budgetary process that we have also started.
Following on from that, I just want to say a few more words about the Coalition of the Willing, because today we have signed off the mature plans. So we've been in the military planning stage for some months now, intensely amongst a number of countries working together. We have now finalised the plan, ready to be operationalised. And so that's a really important step forward. And I pay tribute to all the planners for having got that work done in that time. I'm absolutely convinced that the work needs to be done now and not after the event of a ceasefire. We've got the headquarters established and up and running in Paris, and there is a command structure in place, which is one of the most important things for any operation. And so that is significant, and I think also significant in the Coalition of the Willing that we had US senators and representation there today. On the separate question of recognition of Palestine, let me start by saying that the situation in Gaza is utterly intolerable. We need a ceasefire. We need aid to go in at volume, at pace, in a way that simply isn't happening on the ground at the moment. And of course, we need the hostages to be released. They've been held for a very, very long time. And so we must get to that. It has been the long-standing policy of the Labour Party and of this government to recognise Palestine as part of the process, and that remains our position, not least because I do not think it's possible to have a lasting peace in the Middle East if we don't have a two-state solution. But the focus now has to be unrelentingly on getting the ceasefire that will allow the space for the politics to take over from the fighting, and allow the space for the aid to get in and for the hostages to get out. And Emmanuel and I, as you can imagine, talk about this and many other issues to align our thinking and walk forward. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.